Greetings, students. Today we're going to look at some troubleshooting, some of the things that, some of the issues that beginning flute players may have in their first couple months or so of playing the instrument, because of the way the flute works. As it doesn't have a mouthpiece that goes in or on your mouth, there's often a lot of confusion in terms of how we get our sound started, the way we form our embouchure, and other issues revolving around like hand position and all things that are really critically important for playing the flute. So first thing I want to start with is just is embouchure. So I'm sure your teachers and I myself have started you on with just the head joint by itself. That's a big part of it. Now, however, the really where we need to start with is how does our air start moving? And that happens with our tongue. More than any other wind instrument, I feel the flute has to really have an idea in terms of how the air is started with the tongue and how the air is shaped with the tongue, so we don't huff and puff like we're running a marathon and getting just winded. So what we need to do is really examine on how we set our tongue and how we shape our air going into the instrument. So the embouchure for the flute, as you probably know, is a very relaxed lips with a very relaxed kind of a soft ooh. We're not pushing the lips forward and we're not shining them back, but it's just a very neutral ooh. And the aperture, which is that opening in between your lips, is where the air comes out. The smaller the aperture, the faster the air. The more open the aperture, the larger the air, and therefore either the lower the pitch or and so on. If our aperture is real narrow, that's where we kind of get like an airy sound, if any sound at all. So with our embouchure, we just want to make sure our lips are relaxed. Ooh. The next part of it is our tongue. Now, the way I always teach my beginning flute players is that your tongue needs to come forward, and the tip of your tongue needs to barely touch the back of our top lip, just the back side of our top lip, and barely even touch our bottom teeth as it passes. So we all know how to say, if we form our embouchure and say two or two, 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 if instead of your tongue striking the tip of your gum line above your top teeth, like as if you were a brass player, you just take the tongue, instead of going two or two, you let it instead come forward and touch behind your top lip, the back of your top lip, and have it barely touch the base of your top teeth. Instead of two, it sounds like poo, 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 poo. So I could talk about putting like T and poo together. We don't really want to think poo because we don't want the aperture to close. We don't got a puh. We don't want that type of sound with our starting our flute. So it's more of a poo, 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 poo. My lips are not closing when I make that sound. So if we try the same thing on the head joint, for one count tones or quarter notes typically, we get a good clear sound. Usually flute students will get a sound on the head joint and then have issues later on when we put the whole instrument together. And that comes from not only being consistent with the head joint, but also holding the entire instrument. So if we use our traditional hand position on the flute, all right, the problem with flute is that it's hard to hold because there's no real obvious place to put it. You need to use your left thumb to play the back keys. So I do a kind of a two-step process. First, you grip the barrel of the flute with your right hand, and then you can put your left hand in position. All right, and then and so on and so forth. The first pitch in the book that my students use is A. So the thumb, first and second finger. One of the things that's really important, and I'm going to go ahead and face away so you can see, is when we hold our flute upright, thumb, first and second finger. If we turn the flute counterclockwise, it contacts this part of our hand, all right, this part of our first finger, and that's where the flute needs to rest in the left hand. That's extremely important. The first finger needs to come around and hug. We don't want it up here like this. We don't want it like this or this. Our first finger needs to give the flute a hug. I just came up with that today, all right? Hug the flute with your first finger. Make sure I have it in the right key, all right? So first finger down, thumb on the thumb key. I I know probably some flute players will probably yell at me for this, but I start my flute players on the B flat thumb key, and then we move over to the B key. But anyway, so so I start with that, and then we bring our right hand into position. All right. So by making sure that the flute is resting properly right here, our hands can position themselves properly, and we get a and get a good sound. All right. We always want to make sure it's a, if we're playing the low register of the instrument, good focused air, always starting with the tongue. If your first pitch in the book is F, getting that. All right. Obviously, and then the other part of it is just fingers. Getting the starting fingerings on flute excuse me, is challenging, and there's no better cure for that than practicing. Making sure you're practicing accurate fingers all the time. All right, A, G, F, E flat, D. All right, making sure we're doing that accurately all the time on the flute. So just as a summation, making sure the flute's resting properly right here on our first finger. First finger gives the instrument a hug, and then our right thumb supports on the other side. Sometimes the right thumb can be here. I've seen students do this. I've seen students do this. As long as the right thumb is supporting the instrument and then the left finger is supporting the instrument, then you're in good shape. One way to test that if you're holding your instrument properly is to play C and wiggle your thumb. All right? Just making sure that the instrument's not moving. What we don't want to have happen is the traveling thumb. All right, we want to make sure that the left thumb does not hold up the instrument. The right thumb does in the first finger of the left hand. Hopefully this helps out with some of your troubleshooting issues that you may have on the flute, and I wish you the best of luck.